So firstly, what we know is that people who focus on being happy actually over time become less happy. And just to be clear, I'm not anti-happiness. I've written an entire book called The Oxford Handbook of Happiness. So it's not that I'm anti-happiness, it's more that our happiness comes not as a goal, but as a byproduct of engaging in a voice and in actions and in an honesty with ourselves.
But how do we do that?
And
You
so
lay it out.
We do this in very particular ways. One of the first things that I talk about is showing up. And what I mean by showing up is, instead of trying to push our emotions aside or trying to put on a happy face, do what I call bottling and brooding, instead to literally drop any struggle that you have within yourself by ending the battle. So by not saying to yourself, I'm unhappy, but I shouldn't be unhappy, or I'm miserable in my job, but at least I've got a job, and try rationalize yourself out of it. Really just by opening our hearts up to the fact that we have a full range of emotions,
Right.
that these emotions have helped us and evolved to enable us to position ourselves effectively in the world, and to not struggle with that. So the first part of emotional agility is really about showing up to those emotions.
Right, and then you have a couple other steps. What are-
Absolutely. So showing up with compassion, with kindness, and
Right.
so on. One of the other things that I talk about is stepping out of our emotions. So it's really
Detaching.
important. Yeah, it's important to recognize that our emotions contain data. When I'm feeling guilty, I've never met a mother who's feeling guilty about her parenting,
Who's not feeling guilty.
yeah, well, who at some level is wanting to be present and connected with her children.
Right.
I've never met someone who's upset that their idea was stolen at work who isn't at some level concerned about issues of equity and fairness. So beneath our difficult emotions are signposts to the things that we value.
Okay,
And
so
if
that's really
instead
important.
of struggling with whether we should or shouldn't feel something, it's important for us to say, what is the function of this emotion? What is the value? What is this emotion trying to tell me? Now, within that, it's important for us to recognize that our emotions are data, not directions.
Right.
So because you feel guilty doesn't mean you need to feel guilty.
Right.
Because you feel angry doesn't mean you need to go out and attack the people that you're angry with. So we can create space, which is the stepping out part.
Right, and so your theory is that if we get to know ourselves, if we slow down enough in our life, kind of figure out what is really going on with us, give ourselves space to complain, to write, which releases a lot of the emotions. You talk about carving out time to write, and it doesn't have to be shown to anybody. It's just to kind of help you with your own emotion.
Yes.
That in turn, and you find your way, allows you to get unstuck and be stronger, and then hence happier.
Absolutely. One of the most beautiful embodiments of emotional agility comes from Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi death camps. And the idea that's been attributed to him in his writing is this: between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose. And it's in that choice that comes our growth and freedom. What I talk about in emotional agility is how so often we get hooked by our emotions and thoughts. We treat them as fact. So
Right.
there's no space between the stimulus and response. If we can create space, labeling our emotions effectively, instead of saying, I'm stressed, I'm stressed, I'm stressed, there's a very big difference between being stressed versus disappointed, or stressed versus disillusioned or angry.
Yeah.
So if we can label our emotions effectively, if we can recognize that even when I say something like, I am stressed, what you're doing is you are identifying all of you with being stressed. So I talk about very practical strategies. I'm noticing that I'm feeling angry. I'm noticing that I'm feeling stressed. What you're doing here is, instead of being one and the same as stress, you are recognizing that you're experiencing an emotion.